All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Friday, December 29th, 2017. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Friday, everyone. It is a chilly 8 degrees with a real feel of -1 with light snow here in upstate New York. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show AI Entanglement, Alexa, Amazon, CIA, Tacotron 2, Universal Basic Income, and PC addiction. And we looked at a lot of different things. We looked at how interwoven artificial intelligence and technology in general is becoming in our daily lives, that there is no escape. They're even launching 5G over Africa, so you won't be able to get away from it, even if you're a bushman. But we also took a look at some of these devices finding their ways into our homes and the connections between some of the big tech companies, in this case Amazon, and the intelligence agencies. And one of the reasons why you don't want one of these devices in your houses. But then we ended up the show looking at some mental health issues and addiction. And they had announced that maybe now a gaming disorder, and that would be pushing that dopamine button, could be considered a mental health issue. And that was on the international stage. The United States is still going, we're not really sure. Keep using your devices. Don't pay attention to what is going on behind the curtain. But then there was another story that it talked about where scientists had found nicotine addiction can be blocked in the brain, and they made it sound so simple, but they actually were flipping switches on neurons in the brain to block the substances, in essence, engineering neurons. So now today we're going to take a look a little more at the brain and frequencies, and we've talked about some of this stuff before. Back in, I think it was March of 2017, we had taken a look at Bell Labs. Wait a second, because I missed something. This is the last show of 2017, and I want to make a couple statements about 2017. 2017 was kind of a rough year for me. Back in the end of June, I had a stroke, and it's been a challenge to get back on the horse. And the next 6 months after that has been a lot of juggling. Also in 2017, I had a child who went from being agreeable to being a prepubescent, argumentative pre-teenager. So that has added to my stress. But you also remember we had a lot of computer failures. I lost 3 to 4 computers this year and all kinds of crazy things that happen. I just want to make a point here to thank everybody who listens. Our YouTube channel broke 5,000 subscribers this year, so that was pretty exciting. We're just shy of 1 million views. I think we're just over 200,000 short, but that won't take too long, I hope. Just shy of 1 million views on our YouTube channel, which means that people are hearing what we have to say here. I've received so many different messages from listeners this year, and it's been very inspiring for me to keep going. I just want you to know that it's really been some days dragging myself out here in the morning to get this done. I also want to thank everybody who contributed to the network to help me cover the costs of running this thing, because, this has always been out of my pocket, and help replace some of the machines I have. There were quite a number of you that helped me out there, and I have to say that is a huge help. And it has kept us on the air for this long. So, all right, now that I'm done with my 2017 thank you, so please keep it up. And I know that sometimes it feels like we are up against a wall, and we are, actually. But at least you see it coming. That's the one thing I have to say. You can at least see what they're doing to us. And that's kind of all I really ask. All right, so back in March of 2017, we had looked at Bell Labs quite in detail, and it's some of the inventions that they had come up with, and we discovered that it went way further back than we ever imagined. They had started back in the 1920s. After World War I, they had been commandeered by the federal government to help develop international communications that could be secured against the enemy, not only to troops in the field, but also to submarines. Now, what is interesting about submarines is that to communicate with submarines, you have to use something that's called VLF radio frequency, and that is very low frequency. I don't know what type of beams they are, some sort of radio frequency. But that made me think of something. There was a story that came out in May of 2017, an announcement from NASA. Humans have inadvertently created an artificial barrier around Earth. Oh, whoops. Yes, we have. And what is interesting about VLF is that those fall within the frequency range of the human brain. And that's where we're going to connect this dot to some of the stuff we've been talking about. So this is out of Newsweek, May 18th, 2017. NASA space probes have discovered an artificial barrier around Earth created through human activity, showing that we are not only responsible for shaping the environment on land, but now we are having an impact on space as well. Yes, the virus or the cancer continues. The barrier, which comes and goes, is a result of very low-frequency radio communications interacting with particles in space, which results in a sort of shield protecting Earth from high-energy radiation in space. Oh, yes. So it's a benefit to you. Don't worry about it. We're not screwing things up. This, say scientists, is potentially very good news, as we could use this barrier to protect Earth from extreme space weather resulting from events like coronal mass ejections, which are huge explosions on the sun, where plasmas and electromagnetic fields are ejected from its corona, which is the outermost part of its atmosphere. These ejections can result in geomagnetic storms, which have the potential to knock out communication satellites and power grids. Oh, no. Grid down. It can also mess with your brain. NASA scientists detected the barrier with the Van Allen probes, which are designed to study electrons and ions in our new space environment. Normally, very low frequency, which are VLF signals from radio telescopes, are transmitted from the ground and used to communicate with submarines deep below the surface of the ocean. Ding, ding, ding. However, they also end up going into the atmosphere and are the same frequencies that your brain happens to work on. I'm going to add. The result is a massive VLF bubble that is enshrouding Earth, says NASA, and this bubble can be seen high above Earth's surface in the space environment surrounding it. Further analysis showed that this bubble extends almost exactly to the inner edge of the Van Allen radiation belt. And guys, I mean, I really could get back to a lot of experiments that NASA was doing in the past, utilizing that tether, when they electrified this tether in space. And I actually made a video about that years ago, back right at the very beginning of YouTube. There was a tether experiment, and it's out on YouTube. I'll link to it, where they shoot this thing up into the sky. It was using like a space elevator type thing, and they electrified it, and it broke. Oh, no. But I had read a little bit more in depth about that, and there was some story about the radiation or the Van Allen radiation belt fracturing or some crazy thing that had happened back at that point in time. And honestly, who knows what's true and what isn't anymore? Fake news is everywhere. But I'm just going to say that some of this research, they make it sound like they just discovered this VLF bubble, but they've been manipulating very low frequencies for communication to satellite. I don't know. I'm looking at the timeline here for Bell Labs, and I don't know. But it went way, way, way back. Ship-to-shore radio system, 1929. That was the date on that one. They've been experimenting with this stuff for a very long time, so you can't tell me that they just discovered that there was some influence on our environment. Researchers say that if there were no VLF bubble, the radiation belt boundary would be far closer to Earth than it is. Data from the 1960s indicate that the inner limit of the Van Allen radiation belt used to be far closer to Earth, and when the use of VLF was more limited. And I'm going to add something else to that. Back in the 1960s, you guys have heard the Christmas special, and I wish I still had the first one in its entirety, that we did on this show with my dad, who actually was in Antarctica back in the mid-1960s, and he traveled down there with Wernher von Braun, who's the head of the space program of the United States, and had come over from, I think it was World War II, from the Nazis. He came over, he was part of Operation Paperclip, and when he went down to Antarctica, they were researching going into space, my dad had always told me that they were looking at the Van Allen radiation belts and trying to figure out how to get man out of the atmosphere without becoming irradiated. So I find it very interesting that they mention here that data from the 1960s, which seemed to be the last time they looked at this, was different from what they see now for VLF. And my dad was in the Navy, so they would have been using VLF at that time. As the VLF barrier appears to protect Earth, scientists say that it could be used to remove excess radiation from space surrounding Earth, and NASA is now planning on carrying out tests to see if this could work. Well, thank God. So, all right, now let's take a look at brainwaves. What are brainwaves? Well, at the root of all of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors is the communication between our neurons within our brain. And we've taken a look at a lot of the neuronal pathways and some of the things that they could do with them, flipping switches on and off, and how they can affect behavior and chemical production. Brain waves are produced by synchronized electrical pulses from masses of neurons communicating with each other, and they are detected using sensors placed on the scalp. When we looked at EEGs, they're divided into bandwidths that describe their functions, but are best thought of as continuous spectrums of consciousness, from slow, loud, and functional to fast, subtle, and complex. It is a handy analogy to think of brainwaves as musical notes, and we've read about that before. They're looking to be able to play the brain like they play a piano. The low-frequency waves are like deeply penetrating drum beats, while the higher-frequency brainwaves are more like subtle, high-pitched flutes. And like a symphony, and don't be the out-of-tune tuba, the higher and lower frequencies link and cohere with each other through harmonics. Our brainwaves change according to what we're doing and what we're feeling, and when the slower brainwaves are dominant, we feel tired, slow, sluggish, and dreamy, kind of the way I felt for the last week or so. And the higher the frequencies are dominant when we feel wired or hyper alert. The descriptions that follow are also only broad descriptions. In practice, things are far more complex, and brainwaves reflect different aspects when they occur in different locations in the brain. Brain speeds are measured in hertz, and they are divided into bands that are delineated slow, moderate, and fast. So the very first one is infra-low, and this would be the 0 to less than 0.5 hertz of brainwaves. Infra-low brainwaves, also known as slow cortical potentials, are thought to be the basic cortical rhythms that underlie our higher brain functions. Very little is known about infralow brainwaves, and their slow nature make them difficult to detect and accurately measure, so very few studies have been done. They appear to take a major role in brain timing and network function. And just recently we have read an article where they had discovered about how neurons pulse like heartbeats to make timing, and that would be in the creation of memory and things, where that is very important for temporal memories. So that's kind of interesting. Now, one of the things that I wanted to see here, frequency. I didn't pull this up, but I tried to get a lot of this up. VLF frequencies are in the range of 3 to 30 kilohertz. So hold on one second, because I thought they were in the hertz range. That might even be like some of the ELF stuff. All right, well, we're not going to get there. It's early and it's cold out here. All right, let's continue. Delta waves are 0.5 to 3 hertz. Delta waves are slow, loud brain waves, and they are generated in the deepest meditation and dreamless sleep, and that's like I've been getting the last couple nights. Delta waves suspend external awareness and are the source of empathy. Healing and regeneration are also stimulated in this state, and that is why deep restorative sleep is so essential to the healing process. Theta waves are 3 to 8 hertz. Theta waves occur most often in sleep, but are also dominant in deep meditation. Theta is our gateway to learning, memory, and intuition. In theta, our senses are withdrawn from the external world and focused on signaling originating from within. That is that twilight state, which we normally only experience when we wake up or we drift off to sleep. Yeah, that's when I do my best thinking. In theta, we are in a dream, vivid imagery, intuition, and information beyond our normal conscious awareness. And it is where we hold our stuff, our fears, our troubled history, and our nightmares. So maybe that's why I do most of my thinking there. I think about this stuff, or i.e. my nightmares. Alpha waves are 8 to 12 hertz. Alpha brain waves are dominant during quietly flowing thoughts. And in some meditative states, alpha is the power of now, being here in the present, and alpha is the resting state of the brain. Alpha waves aid overall mental coordination, calmness, alertness, and the mind-body integration for learning. So alpha are probably a pretty good wave if you want to learn something. All right. So let's continue here. Next one is our beta waves. These are 12 to 38 hertz. Beta waves dominate our normal waking state of consciousness when attention is directed toward cognitive tasks and the outside world. Beta is a fast activity presented when we are alert, attentive, engaged in problem solving, judgment, decision making, and focused mental activity. And beta is probably one of the hardest ones for people to get into now, just with the distraction of their devices all the time. Remember, your devices distract you from being in the state of full consciousness and being able to pay attention and do deep thinking. All right, and then we have gamma waves. Gamma waves are the fastest of brain waves. These are high frequencies like a flute, and they relate to simultaneous processing of information from different brain areas. This is when like you are in hyperwave. If you've ever had one of those aha moments where all of a sudden all the little dots go together and it goes that's gamma brainwaves. Gamma brainwaves pass information rapidly and quietly. In the most subtle of brainwave frequencies, the mind has to be quiet to access gamma. That's one thing I have a lot of trouble with. You know, when you get a moment of quiet, when you're not being distracted by the myriad of forms of communication and your outside distractions, people at home, people talking to you, and all kinds of your daily stresses, it's very difficult to get to gamma. But gamma is when you make, I think, some of your best conclusions. Gamma was dismissed as spare brain noise until researchers discovered that it was highly active when the states of universal love, altruism, and higher virtues were felt. And gamma is also above the frequency of neuronal firing, so how it is generated actually remains a mystery. It is speculated that gamma rhythms modulate perception and consciousness, and that a greater presence of gamma relates to an expanded consciousness and a spiritual emergence. So what do brainwaves mean to you? Well, our brainwave profile and our daily experience of the world are inseparable. And when our brainwaves are out of balance, then we will have corresponding problems in our emotional and our neuropsychiatric health. That's where some of that transcranial stimulation comes in, I think. Research has identified brainwave patterns associated with all sorts of emotional and neurological conditions. Oh, no. Over-arousal. That is one of the things that we discovered when we were listening to that addiction specialist talking about children working with technology, that when they're playing games, it causes an over-arousal in their brain. Over-arousal in certain brain areas is linked with anxiety disorders, and that's what I feel on a daily basis when I get ready for the show. Sleep problems, that's something I've been experiencing for the last week. Nightmares, and that is just a given. Hypervigilance, impulsive behavior, anger, aggression, agitated depression, chronic nerve pain, and spasticity. Well, I guess I have over-arousal then from this stuff because it's not good. It hasn't been helping me any get better. Under-arousal in certain areas leads to some types of depression, attention deficit, chronic pain, and insomnia. And a combination of under-arousal and over-arousal in some cases causes anxiety, depression, and ADHD. Instabilities in brain rhythms correlate with tics, obsessive-compulsive disorder, aggressive behavior, rage, bruxism, and I have that. That's grinding your teeth, panic attacks, bipolar disorder, migraines, narcolepsy, epilepsy, sleep apnea, which I just did my sleep study, vertigo, tinnitus, anorexia or bulimia, diabetes, hyperglycemia, and explosive behavior. So this isn't a good thing at all, people. So how do you alter your brainwaves? Well, you can get one of those little neurofeedback headsets. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. I say just get away from your devices and get into nature. By rule of thumb, any process that changes your perception changes your brainwaves. And in my research here, one of the things that's become very apparent to me is that just about any external stimuli, whether it be through your eyes, through your ears, through taste, through smell, through touch, actually influences your biological makeup in some fashion. And we have discovered that DARPA has been spending a lot of time looking at a lot of these interactions, and so have a lot of the smarty pants at MIT that are being funded by DARPA. Chemical interventions such as medications or recreational drugs are the most common methods to alter your brain function. However, brainwave training is our method of choice. So yeah, put your little device on. Over the long term, traditional Eastern methods such as meditation and yoga train your brainwaves into balance, but of the newer methods, brainwave entrainment is an easy, low-cost method to temporarily alter your brainwave state. If you are trying to solve a particular difficulty or fine-tune your brainwave function, state-of-the-art brain training methods like neurofeedback or EMF, which I don't quite know what that is, deliver targeted, quick, and lasting results. EMF. We'll have to look that one up. So what is the various function of brainwaves? Out of Scientific American, I don't know. This is getting into the same brain states again. I don't know if we're going to go there. So then here's something else we're going to look at. This is a study out of Germany. Where's the date on this puppy? I think it was back in the 90s at some time, titled Biological Effects of Very Low Frequency Atmospherics in Humans, a Review. This comes out of the Department of Clinical and Physiological Psychology out of the Justus Liebig University in Gießen, Germany. The living organism is constantly affected by natural electromagnetic influences covering a wide range of frequencies and amplitudes. One of these influences, with frequencies in the very low frequency range, which would be the VLF, and that is the 1 to 100 kilohertz, is represented by a phenomenon called VLF atmospherics or VLS spherics or S-spherics, is a very short, weak, dampening electromagnetic impulse generated by atmospheric discharges such as lightning and communicating with submarines. Due to this fact, they can be used to study the characteristics of lightning as well as the lower ionosphere, and besides their significance as indicators of thunderstorm activity, it has been hypothesized that S-spherics are able to affect the functioning of living organisms and physico-chemical systems. More specifically, this atmospheric parameter has also been considered a possible trigger for changes in the somatic and emotional well-being of humans, sometimes referred to as weather sensitivity symptoms or meteoropathy. The following review attempts to summarize present knowledge of biological significance of the VLF spherics in humans. So what are VLF spherics? Well, the living organism is constantly affected by natural electromagnetic influences, or even man-made, covering a wide range of frequencies and amplitudes. One of these influences with frequencies of VLF, 1 to 100 kilohertz range, is represented by VLF spherics. Spherics is an electromagnetic impulse that is emitted during thunderstorms, and generally it is by lightning discharges, and they propagate with approximately the speed of light through the atmospheric waveguide, which is formed by the Earth's surface in the lower ionosphere. During their propagation, spherics undergo pronounced changes with regard to their amplitude and frequency composition due to the dispersion and the dampening effects. You know, this makes you wonder, when they were launching all of those nano satellites to plasma bomb the ionosphere, to mess around with radio propagation. What did that have to do with? Was it just radio propagation, or was it messing with some of this VLF spherics, because they bounce radio waves off of the lower ionosphere with increasing distance from their place of origin? Due to both higher and lower frequency components, they decrease. And since atmospheric waveguide functions similar to that of a band pass filter for frequencies around 10 kilohertz, this component undergoes minimal attenuation during the signal's propagation. Besides their significance as indicators of thunderstorm activity, biological effects of VLF spherics in humans have been reported. In general, these studies were characterized by two different approaches, and the majority of the studies were based on descriptive correlation approaches, where attributes of the natural spheric's activity were correlated with physiological parameters, indices of somatic and emotional well-being, and behavioral measures. Here, spherics activity was usually described as impulse rates, which were registered with different frequency bands and intensity ranges. Only rarely were simulated studies performed in order to investigate spherics on humans under controlled experimental conditions. One of the first observations of an association between biological processes in humans and natural spherics activity was mentioned by Giorno in 1934, who described the case of Major Holitzy. The Major suffered from tinnitus after being wounded in the First World War. Interestingly enough, Bell Labs, when they were brought on to help the military after the First World War, started working with, what year did I say that was? Ship-to-shore radio communication systems in 1929. But in order to identify the triggers for his unbearable ear noises, he started to record the intensity of his symptoms every day, which showed a noticeable covariation with the impulse rate of spherics. It was Reeder in 1960 who did the first specific investigations concerning biological effects of atmospherics in humans. Between 1948 and 1954, he assessed variations in pain perception within various patient groups over a period of several months, and at the very same time he registered spherics rates within two frequency bands, and that is the 4 to 12 kilohertz and the 10 to 50 kilohertz, and correlated both the atmospheric and biological parameters with one another. By using his method, he found significantly positive correlations between the impulse rates of atmospherics and the pain intensity reported by patients suffering from brain injuries, damaged tissue, which would be operation wounds or scars, and internal illnesses such as asthma, angina pectoris, and migraines. Besides that, he observed higher rates of criminal offenses, suicides, car accidents, and prolonged reaction times during enhanced natural spherics activity. Then a study by Rothbauer in 1984, 85, and 87 revealed a connection between different pathological symptoms, in the impulse rate of VLF spherics. This research group used a registration method to developed by Baumer and Erikmeyer in 1980, who described atmospherics as having clearly separated spectral maxima, that'd be 6, 8, 10, and 12 and 28 kilohertz, and the impulse rates at these frequencies were associated with the occurrence of epileptic seizures, sudden deafness, and myocardial infarctions. Oh, so no, they didn't know how to make heart attacks happen. Pretty damn interesting. In the group of patients suffering from epilepsy who have been monitored over a period of 7 months, the onset of seizures was positively correlated with the 28 kilohertz spherics and negatively correlated with the 10 kilohertz rate. And in instances of sudden deafness, which have been analyzed for samples of 203 patients over a period of 1 year, an elevated incidence of illness showed up for the specific day when the impulse rates in the 8 kilohertz range was low and the 12 kilohertz spherics rate of the day before had been high. Now remember, we had looked at some of the stuff going on in Cuba with the State Department emissaries and some of the damage that had been done, and they thought that it was some sort of electromagnetic or sonic weapon. And that is what a lot of the research has been going into by the military, not only here, but also in Russia. So now let's jump a little forward because I have quite a few more articles I want to get to. So we had read about a story in 2017 about a new project that DARPA had going on called Radio Bio. What role does electromagnetic signaling have in biological systems? Well, why the hell would they want to know that? A new program to explore whether electromagnetic waves are purposefully transmitted and received within or between cells, and if so, figure out how to leverage these insights, not just for biosystems, but also for communicating in cluttered electromagnetic environments. Now, talking about communicating in cluttered electromagnetic environments, remember DARPA had their grand Spectrum Collaboration Challenge that they had set upon, looking to get Smarty Pants groups to find a way to use artificial intelligence to multiplex, splice, and dice on the fly the full electromagnetic spectrum, so they get rid of all those pesky FCC licenses that give an organization unfettered use of a slice of the electromagnetic pie. So back to this Radio Bio program, February 7th, 2017, DARPA.mil. For decades, scientists have wondered whether electromagnetic waves have played a role in intra- and intercellular signaling. Researchers have suggested since the 1960s, right, that, for example, that terahertz frequencies, and remember, right now they are working with millimeter wave frequencies for some of this new 5G they're rolling out, but in the future, they're looking at terahertz frequencies. They're already using some of those frequencies and doing the portable naked body scanners that also can do chemical and biological sensing, which is a remote stop and frisk, and they got it working in New York City with a device from DARPA, by the way, with the police department there. But in the 1960s, for example, we discovered that terahertz frequencies maybe emanate from cell membranes, but they have lacked the technology and the tools to conduct reproducible experiments that could produce whether or not electromagnetic waves constitute purposeful signals for biological function or if they're merely background noise. Well, I wouldn't think it was background noise. Remember, back at Los Alamos Laboratory, 2 scientists had come out and had discovered that terahertz frequencies can also unzip DNA. Gotta love when you can accidentally zip and unzip on the fly in vivo. So with recent advances in technology and modeling, experiments may now be possible to test these signaling hypotheses. DARPA's Radio Bio program, announced today, February 2017, seeks to establish if purposeful electromagnetic wave signaling between biological cells exists, and if so, if evidence supports that it does, to determine what information the cells are transferring. The validity, so they want to hack our cellular communication now. The validity of existing and new electromagnetic biosignaling claims requires an understanding of how the structure and the function of microscopic natural antennas are capable of generating and receiving information in a noisy spectral environment. There are many complex interactions within and between cells, so determining if electromagnetic waves, which could be either high frequency or low frequency, somehow play a role in transmitting and receiving meaningful signals through what might be an ion-rich, we found out those calcium ion gateways are how they flip switches in the brain, through an ion-rich aqueous solution is a significant challenge, says Mike Fitty, DARPA's program manager for Radio Bio. If we can prove that purposeful signaling is happening, then the next step would be to discover how the process works, and this insight could eventually lead to a broad range of technologies important to hacking biology, as well as a new small antenna design and other innovative concepts for communicating systems in ever-increasing cluttered electromagnetic environments. Right, they want to connect every one of your cells to the cloud. Fitty is quick to note that Radio Bio is a fundamental research effort, and even if the program proves that electromagnetic signaling occurs between the cells, applications would likely be many, many years away. The program envisions 2 24-month phases. During phase 1, performers will be asked to theoretically model and stimulate hypothesized electromagnetic signaling pathways and then experimentally test those theoretical predictions. In phase 2, the goal would be to independently develop test beds to replicate, confirm, and demonstrate the pathways modeled in phase 1, and to reveal design principles potentially relevant to biological or other applications so they can make some sort of biological monster. That's all I envision. And one of the greatest challenges of the program will be to develop theoretical and numerical models that can describe the properties of near-field, time-varying, sub-wavelength size biological structures that function as antennas. To overcome such difficulties, Radio Bio seeks expertise in antenna design, theoretical and structural biology, biochemistry, and other related disciplines. And I'll guarantee you that someone at MIT is going to be bidding on this. The Web Proposers Day for Radio Bio was scheduled for February 21st, 2017. So I guess we'll have to wait to see how that one turns out. So now let's take a look at another publication that talks about this. Radio Bio, DARPA to explore cell-to-cell communication. This comes out of microwavenews.com. Investigating natural antennas sending and receiving messages at kilohertz to terahertz frequencies. The Pentagon wants to know more about how cells use electromagnetic radiation to talk to each other, and the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, more affectionately known as DARPA, is embarking on a new program called Radio Bio to determine whether cells are able to exchange information with electromagnetic signals, and if so, what the cells are saying and how they say it. DARPA is the high-risk, high-reward research arm of the Department of Defense, and it was created in 1958, blah, 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 blah. We don't need to know their history. DARPA develops weapons of the future, ding, 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 says Sharon Weinberger, the author of The Imagineers of War, The Untold Story of DARPA, the Pentagon agency that changed the world, which will be published next month by the publisher Knopf. It funds everything from basic science to advanced technology, though the ultimate goal is always to develop something that can be used by the military. And that is the key to all this. You know, we see tons and tons of money being spent by DARPA at all these universities to get these kids to start developing these next generation tools that can be used for war. And that's where you need to be careful. The Radio Bio program will determine the validity of electromagnetic biosignaling claims, and where evidence exists, learn how the structure and the function of these natural antennas are capable of generating and receiving information in a noisy, cluttered electromagnetic environment. DARPA notes that some of these interactions are well known, citing as examples vision, photosynthesis, bioluminescence, neural networks, and magnetic navigation. Those awarded DARPA grants under Radio Bio will propose specific electromagnetic signaling mechanisms and then experimentally test these hypotheses. They are open to investigating a broad range of frequencies from the kilohertz to the terahertz in the far infrared, and possibly as high as the petahertz, which is beyond that. We are not excluding any frequencies from consideration if a proposal has a good approach for definitely determining whether purposeful signaling occurs in a biosystem, says DARPA. When asked about the size of the Radio Bio program, the spokesman was noncommittal, saying only that the budget will be determined, wink, in part by the number and the quality of the proposals received. So we have an unlimited pot of money for this. Many of these are not new about cell-to-cell signaling. 25 years ago, Ross Hadley described how cells can whisper together across barriers of cell membrane, and such messages, he believed, could control complex biological processes. Further, Addy maintained that external electromagnetic radiation could also activate, overwhelm, or muddle such processes. These are more commonly known as non-thermal effects. So back in the 1960s, Adley worked on a top-secret DARPA project called Pandora to investigate the effects of low levels of microwave radiation. Well, how interesting is that, considering microwave radiation is what they use in cell towers? The project was initiated after the U.S. government discovered that the Soviets were beaming microwaves at its embassy in Moscow. We had talked all about that. That was where some of that voice-to-skull technology came from, where they were beaming in the microwave sonic range voices into people's heads and making them hear things that weren't actually there. In her new book, Weinberger calls Project Pandora, quote, one of the most bizarre episodes in the history of Cold War science. And I'm going to add to that, I think we are entering the second phase of the bizarreness. So, all right. So Radio Bioprogram wants to find out ways to communicate biologically utilizing radio waves. So now we have DARPA's Grand Spectrum Challenge. 5 things to know about it. DARPA seeks to support advanced spectrum sharing techniques with the Spectrum Collaboration Grand Challenge. This is a story out of August 29th, 2017. The Defense Advanced Research Project Agency is in the midst of a new Grand Challenge initiative focused on advancing technical capabilities around spectrum sharing. The Spectrum Collaboration Grand Challenge was announced last year in 2016 at the International Wireless Communication Expo and is a 3-year program with prizes worth $3.75 million. DARPA aims to push the envelope on what is technically feasible in spectrum sharing to integrate automated machine learning to optimize the use of the spectrum. Here are 5 things to know about this Grand Challenge program. And yeah, now as they learn about whether or not cells also communicate and biological processes utilize parts of the electromagnetic spectrum and they hand it all over to the AI, this will not be good for biology, people. I'm telling you, this is a big, scary monster in the closet. DARPA wants participants to focus on collaborative spectrum sharing, and although some spectrum sharing arrangements are based on devices contending competitively for the same spectrum resources, DARPA plans to reward teams for developing smart systems that collaboratively rather than competitively adapt in real time to today's fast-changing, congested spectrum environment, redefining the conventional spectrum management roles of humans and machines in order to maximize the flow of radio frequency signals. DARPA seeks to create Skynet. DARPA seeks to create a radically new paradigm for using and managing access to the electromagnetic spectrum in both military and civilian domains. DARPA sees machine learning and automation as critical to spectrum collaboration. The primary goals of the project, according to DARPA, is to, quote, imbue radios. So they're going to make radios smart with advanced machine learning capabilities so they can collectively, in a swarm, develop strategies that optimize the use of the wireless spectrum in ways not possible with today's intrinsically inefficient and ancient approach of pre-allocating exclusive access to designated frequencies. So they're going to get rid of all the FCC licensing. Number 3, DARPA has opened up a new advanced testbed in support of the Spectrum Grand Challenge. DARPA officially opened its Coliseum, which that should be telling, its Coliseum testbed in April, which can emulate tens of thousands of potential interactions among hundreds of various types of wireless communication devices within a virtual square kilometer. The Coliseum is 256 software-defined radio units, and according to the agency, is the world's largest channel emulator with its channel transmission and reception frequency able to be tuned to between 10 megahertz and 6 gigahertz. Well, I wonder if maybe that's why I can't sleep and feel anxiety all the time. They just turned all this shit on. This testbed resides in a 30-foot by 20-foot server room on a campus of Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, according to DARPA. And Johns Hopkins is also where they do a lot of the brain research. And they supplied the software-defined radio units and the field programmable gate arrays for the system. Number 4, 30 teams have been chosen for participation. Early in 2017, DARPA selected 30 Grand Challenge participants. Of these, 22 teams are from academia and large and small companies. 8 individuals made it into the Grand Challenge as well. There's a full list of contenders, and in terms of funding, 24 of the teams are open track candidates, meaning that they pay their own costs, and there was a total of 113 candidates for open track participation. 6 of the teams earned their way into the proposal track, which includes $500,000 of contract funding. And last but not least, the Grand Challenge's first preliminary contest is coming up in December of 2017. The Spectrum Collaboration Grand Challenge will be held in 3 phases. The first elimination event will be held in December of 2017, but in the meantime, DARPA is holding half a dozen testing scrimmages, one each month until December. One is going to be in September, and then October, November, December. And DARPA has noted that some of the top-performing teams in the first phase will receive $750,000 and automatically proceed to the second phase. All teams which proceed to the second phase must pass the technical hurdles that are set up by the organizers. A similar event to whittle down the competitors will be held at the end of 2018. Finalists who make it through the first 2 contests will meet a live championship match that is slated to be held in late 2019. And the top 3 prizes to be awarded at the end of the contest are $2 million, $1 million, and $750,000. So why are we talking about this? Well, remember, 5G is coming, and they are doing all kinds of different things with the electromagnetic spectrum in our atmosphere. Well, there was a story that caught my attention this morning, and when I first read it, I said, are they really talking about what I think they are? And I did a little more research, and yes, they are. This was titled, this is out of a publication that I never heard of before, which is why I looked a little deeper. But this is out of something called Wow News, QSWowNews.com, titled Major Breakthrough in Cell Transformation in the Human Body, dated December 26th, 2017. Out of South Korea, which is where a lot of our military-industrial complex does some of their mad science, offshore mad science country. Professor Kim Jong-pil, not Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-pil's team in the Department of Medical Biotechnology of the Dongkung University in Seoul, South Korea, has developed a technique that can convert a type of cell in the human body into other types of cells. Ding, 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 ding. Now, when I read that, I thought, wait a second, that sounds a lot like those pluripotent stem cells. Well, yes, it is. Remember, pluripotent stem cells, they discovered a while back they could take scrapings from your skin, put them in a petri dish, mix them up with a few little chemicals, turn them into these IPS stem cells that then could be turned into any other type of cell in the body. The developed technology can recover damaged nerves and muscles within the cells in the human body, which is a significant contribution to application of this technique to a degenerative brain disease such as Parkinson's. Stem cells are undifferentiated cells that are capable of differentiation into various types of cells. Various efforts have been made to cure cardiovascular diseases or brain diseases by converting stem cells into myocardial cells or nerve cells. However, contamination problems may occur when these stem cells of patients are then pulled out and converted, followed by retransplantation. So to overcome this difficulty, Professor Kim's team invented a method that makes cells in the human body differentiated directly into preferred cells. The cell's direct conversion reprogramming is a technique that induces cells using electromagnetic frequencies to be converted into preferred cells by controlling the cell's fate quite freely. To do this, a new concept of cell conversion techniques based on nanoelectronics has been developed in Korea independently. The nanoelectronics-based cell conversion technique was applied in vivo, and that was in a living organism, direct conversion reprogramming. So they're reprogramming cells inside of a living organism using some sort of little gold nanoplate, it looks like, and electromagnetic frequency. So I said, wait a minute, is that really what they're talking about? So I did a search, and I came upon a story out of businesskorea.co.kr. This is a Korean publication from October 7th, 2014. This very same scientist, it is titled Success in Creating Induced Pluripotent Stem Cells, and that is IPS stem cells. Korean research team is the first to succeed in creating induced pluripotent stem cells, which are the ones that do not cause cancer, through electromagnetic radiation. Yes, they did. This is a breakthrough to advance the development of safe and patient-customized stem cell treatments. You know, just like in that precision medicine initiative, the Ministry of Science, the ICT, and the Future Planning group in Korea announced on October 6th of 2014 that a research arm led by Professor Kim Jung-pil at the Department of Medical Biotechnology at Dongkong University has achieved such an outcome. Electromagnetic radiation has various effects on living organisms, but this was the very first time that we've identified the phenomenon that certain types of electromagnetic radiation can actually change the fate of cells. Based on this fact, the research team succeeded in creating the IPS stem cells by electromagnetic radiation through cellular reprogramming. Cellular reprogramming is the most promising technology in the field of stem cells to create customized cells for patients by freely transforming the fate of the cells. It is quite inefficient, and it takes a long time to produce conventional IPS cells in the Petri dish. And in addition, these IPS cells have critical safety issues as cancer-inducing factors are used to make them. However, by using electromagnetic radiation, it has become 37 times more efficient to produce iPS stem cells, and moreover, this method does not use cancer-inducing factors, which means it is safe for the human body. The research team, yeah, sure it is. Let's just start reprogramming on the fly. Wait, put that cell phone up next to your head. The research team expected that this electromagnetic radiation stimulus can radically improve the treatment effects of current stem cells and contribute to the development of innovative stem cell treatments, which is entirely different from present ones. The results of this research was published online in ACS Nano, an internationally renowned academic journal in nanoscience, on September 23rd of 2014. So then I searched a little bit more, and I found an article published in the AAS, Science of Translational Medicine, and this is typically where you find a lot of medical articles written for journals. And this was titled, and this was October 14th, 2014, Electromagnetic Production of Stem Cells. Really? And so now this is an odd paper, and its subject matter is unusual. Where it is published is unusual, and it is also unusual that no one seems to have noticed it. And that is the author, Derek Lowe, who is writing this. A reader sent it along to me. Quote, electromagnetic fields mediate efficient cell reprogramming into a pluripotent state. Yep, this paper says that stem cells can be produced from ordinary somatic cells by exposure to electromagnetic fields. Everyone will recall the fervor that attended the reports that cells could be reprogrammed by exposure to weak acid baths, and even the eventual tragic collapse of the whole business. So why isn't there more noise around this publication? Well, one answer might be that not many people who cared about stem cell biology actually read ACS Nano, and there's probably something to that, but that immediately makes you wonder why the paper is appearing in ACS Nano to start with, because it is also hard to see how it relates to nanotechnology per se, except in this news publication they showed these little gold nano sheets being used as like antennas or something. An uncharitable guess would mean that the manuscript made the rounds of several higher profile and more appropriate journals, and it finally ended up where it is. But so what does the paper itself have to say? It claims that extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields can cause somatic cells to transform into pluripotent stem cells, and that this process is mediated by EMF effects on a particular enzyme, and that would be the histone methyltransferase, MII2. And that is an H3K4 methyltransferase, and it has also been found to be potentially important in germline stem cells and in spermatogenesis. So that's what's really important here is that germline stem cells are the ones that pass down between generations. And spermatogenesis is involving the sperm cells at the fertilization period. And if they can reprogram germline and spermatogenesis using very low, extremely low frequency EMF, what is this technology doing to the future of the human race, guys? They really are modifying humanity, it seems like to me. Whether or not it's accidentally or on purpose, there definitely is something here. Otherwise, I haven't seen anyone suggesting it is a master regulator of stem cell generation, but then there is a lot that we do not know about epigenetics and stem cells. There is, however, a lot that we know about electromagnetism. Over the years, there have been unaccountable reports of biological activity for electromagnetic fields, and you can go back to the controversy over the effects of power lines in residential areas, and then the later disputes about the effects of cell phones, just to pick two that have had the vast amounts of coverage. The problem is no one seems to have been able to demonstrate anything definite in any of these cases, and of course that was on purpose because it would ruin an entire cellular industry, as well as your Wi-Fi that also operates in the microwave range. And as far as I know, studies have either shown no real effects, or when something is turned up, no one has been able to reproduce it, and I'm sure a lot of money went into that. And that goes both for laboratory studies or the attempts at observational or epidemiological studies, too. Nothing definite over and over again. There is probably a reason for that. Yeah, and that's called very big lobbying groups. What I have trouble with is the mechanism by which an enzyme gets induced by low-frequency electromagnetic fields. That has always been a basic argument against such things. You almost have to assume that new physics to make a strong connection because nothing seems to fit. The energies involved are too weak and the absorptions don't match up and so on. So at least that's what I thought. But until this paper, there's a whole string of references about extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields doing all sorts of things to all sorts of cell types. But it is worth noting that the authors also reference papers showing that they are linked to cancer epidemiology too. And it is true, though, that if you do a PubMed search for low-frequency electromagnetic fields, you get a very vast pile of references, although I'm not really sure about some of them. The authors say that the maximum effect in their study was seen at 50 hertz, and that is indeed really, really low frequency. And that's about where the brain frequency is, the upper end. And the wavelengths for a radio signal down there is just 6,000 kilometers. Just get antennas to work in that range is a major challenge, and it's hard for me to picture how subcellular structures could respond to these wavelengths at all, but don't worry about it because DARPA's working on that with the Radio Brio program. I mean, this is nuts, guys. So there seems to be all sorts of theories in literature about how enzyme levels and transcription level effects might be achieved, but no consensus. But look out, because the